Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Here's What We Know. And I was just telling her before we got on this. I was saying, my team are like, "Hey, Christina Gomez, can you get her back on? Because everybody loved Christina Gomez, and if you could get her back on, so could you at least ask her?" And I'm like, "I'll ask, but she's a busy young lady." And she said yes. So I am so thrilled. From Strange Paradigms, it's Christina Gomez. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing so well. It's a beautiful day outside. I can't complain. How are you doing, Gary?
I'm doing well. As we were saying, I'm the father of teenagers, and so I'm busy. I got things to do and places to be, but no better place to be than right here, right now. And you're killing it. I love your reels. I love the alter egos. Right? There's this
Yeah.
Christina, and then there's the backward hat wearing Christina, who's the skeptic, I would think. I thought, okay, that's fun. That's a fun way of approaching it.
Thank you so much. It was definitely going off of a limb just because the work that I do talking about UFOs, cases, updates, and even government and politics with UFOs, it's very serious. Needs to be held very professionally. But this year I thought I want to have a little bit of fun. I definitely want to touch a much younger audience and get them involved in this. So I am trying something new, adding a little bit of comedy when reporting UFOs in 60 seconds, and it's been doing okay.
Well, it's fun because the content, the subject is okay. If you're either interested or you're not, right? And you're either open to it or you're a complete skeptic. And the way you presented it, you're not presenting anything as, oh, this is frivolous. It's just you are imagining the skeptic's reply.
I do read the comments. So actually a lot of the things that Tina says, I want the backwards hat, it's coming off of people's comments and just kind of regurgitating it. It's pretty funny.
That's fun. How much time do you truly spend doing research every week? I mean, because you do a great show and you know all the stuff and you have to be so on it. And I know how much time I spend on doing research with my guests. But you're covering such a broad topic, even though it's specialized. There's so many things. How much time do you spend on that?
I honestly can't even think about it. So when I'm not working one of my three jobs, I'm focusing on the UFO phenomenon and doing research and trying to understand as much as I can. I have been a little bit under the weather the last 2 weeks, so I haven't been doing as much research or producing as much content. But I'm hoping to get back onto it now that I'm feeling a little bit better.
And the worst thing trying to do this when you have like a flu, when you sound like hell.
Yeah. And you just feel dreadful. You're like, I don't want to do anything. I want to sleep in a little burrito of a blanket. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me.
And you
Yeah.
can't focus is what when you just can't get your mind to coordinate all the thoughts. And especially with
That's
what
right.
you do, because I mean, I'll go down the UFO or let's be clear, the UAP rabbit hole now, because they had to get rid of the name UFO. There was just too much baggage on UFO.
That's what they say.
It's interesting, but what I love, and I love the tack that you have been. When I was saying trying to keep your mind coordinated, mine's now because I feel great, but I've just got all these thoughts because this conversation is so much fun, and when you get to talk to somebody who's truly into it and aware of it and approaching it, and this is what I love in the last 5 years, we truly have. It appears to me started a truly scientific approach of trying to figure these things out. And so when I get to talk to somebody who's been doing the legwork, I get geeked up, as you can tell.
That's the only way to react. When you love a topic and you're talking to someone that knows about it, all you can do is get geeked out about it. Otherwise, it's no fun.
Well, and the things that you've been bringing out to light lately, because yes, I do follow you, is as we like to think these are new phenomenons. Now we're getting a lot of more visual data with the military pilots and stuff like that. That's cool. But as you've brought up, there have been sightings throughout history that
That's
we've
right.
had paintings of and all this kind of stuff.
That's right. And that's the most exciting part. And I've mentioned this before. A lot of people, including myself, we really enjoy researching and looking at cases before the conventional explanations like drones and satellites and weather balloons, which is kind of the way that people are conditioning the public to say you didn't see a UFO. You saw one of these three things. Now, during Blue Book in the 1950s into the 1960s, it was Hynek that was the one that created the swamp gas conclusion. That was
And
him.
he was the guy, the scientist they brought in. What was it, A.J. Hynek or something like that? And
Yes,
they
J.
brought
Allen
him
Hynek.
in,
Yeah.
and he came in as the skeptic, saying, "I don't believe all of this. It'll take me 10 minutes to prove it wrong. Not a problem." But continue your story.
So he was originally an astronomer, and then the Air Force said, "Hey, we're making this new UFO research project. It's called Project Blue Book. We want you to be the head of it, and we want you to investigate these UFO cases and explain them away. We want you to get rid of that paperwork, okay? We don't really care about this topic. Just explain this stuff away." And the first few years, he was on it. He's like, "Guys, that wasn't a UFO. You saw Venus. You saw swamp gas. You saw an owl on top of a tree. Like, come on. Are you thick? Like, get it together." As the years progressed, he began to realize there's so much more to this. There's actually so many things that are unexplained. And Project Blue Book was also receiving reports from other parts of the world. One of those was in the Netherlands, for instance, in the 1952 and 1954. And what's remarkable about this is that while other countries have had UFO offices and projects and research groups for decades, it's always been the US that has been receiving these from other countries. And this is relevant to today because when AARO released their Volume 1 report about UFOs that was released in March of last year, on the first or second page, it said, "AARO and other foreign offices agree on the same conclusion. There's nothing to see here." And it seems like AARO is just another Project Blue Book 2.0. There haven't really been any differences. One thing that people have realized, however, is that the previous director of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who resigned in December of 2023, and it was created in 2022, AARO, the AARO office, people are like, he kind of looks like J. Allen Hynek. That they kind of
Yeah,
look similar.
has the goatee. He's got that. He's
Yeah.
a short guy. I mean, it's the absolutely, and it's interesting, isn't
And
it?
so people are thinking, those that are optimistic, that are like, maybe while Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was not really saving face for AARO, a lot of contradictory comments that he made to the public. He seemed very arrogant. Maybe as the years progress, he might become another J. Allen Hynek that began to push for the disclosure of the information that he knows that was given to him, because we are aware it is public information that J. Allen Hynek wrote books about UFOs, the things that really puzzled him, like the UFO experience. He helped create movies. We know this information about UFOs. So could Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick be the same? I don't know as of yet. Right now, the only connection between the two is that they look kind of
I
similar.
have a goatee. Except I don't think Kirkpatrick smokes a pipe, which he should. I mean, I think that just should be ever since Edwin Hubble and the pipe, that should just be part of your outfit, you know?
I'm with
Yeah.
you on that one.
And it's I'm working on getting Alex Filippenko on the show with me. The astronomer at Berkeley. And I love astrophysics. That's where my passion really is. And my thing with astrophysics is the more we discover, the less we know. The more we think things were impossible. We keep finding things that are impossible, right? We just found that tri-star system that was very rare, and then they think it's they just found the neutron star. Well, they thought the what is it, magnetar, and they thought should be from a young universe or young, and they found it was from an old dying place. Which, as I was explaining it to a friend of mine, I said it's like finding a beard on a 3-year-old, right? where it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't, that should not be there. And I love getting these things going down that. But yeah, the AARO project, and NASA built this whole thing. NASA did this thing where they had all these different distinguished scientists and Sean Kirkpatrick, and I can't remember all the Cynthia and Josh Stetter or something like that. And they went into it with, in my opinion, trying to do the whole, it's not what you think it is. Do you know how many satellites are up there? Do you know how a bird looks on infrared? Do you know, you can only see the engine, but they still don't, the, the, the gravitational, the acceleration things, when you see them talk, they never talk about, okay, they went 400 miles in a matter of seconds. You know, it does. It has that weird thing where you don't. This is the era of conspiracy theories, right? It is. We thought it was the '60s. It's now. You know, and what we've learned over the last few years is a lot of times what they tell us the truth is not the truth. And with channels like yours, it's where people go, okay, well, here's somebody who is trying to be objective, but not from this all can't be true. You know what I'm saying? You could come from we're trying to be objective, but I'm coming from the this can't be true camp, like Sean Kirkpatrick. That's where I feel he's coming from. Where I feel you and a number of the people that I know you've talked to and interviewed are coming from, I'm a skeptic, but this could be true.
We just want the truth. And we can't find that truth if bias is right in front of our eyes. Because then we're only going to look for answers that fit into our narrative. And that's detrimental. And that's why it's so great and remarkable to get scientists involved, because they're following the data. Now, can data be manipulated? Yes, it can. But it's harder to do because there's a paper trail versus I'm only going to share this case with you because it fits everything that I think about UFOs and extraterrestrials. Now, when we're dealing with NASA, when they gave their media briefing, Gary, I agree with you. It was very condescending. The way that they were speaking to the people of like, guys, it's so explainable. Like, what are you on about? And every single person on that panel, didn't treat the public with any type of intelligence and even basic respect. I felt like they were talking to people that were in kindergarten. And this became more relevant because that NASA briefing was brushed off pretty quickly. It was only 45 minutes long. It was about the information that NASA was conducting while researching UFOs for their UAP independent study group. That's what it was titled, but they gave us no information. And then during the latest hearing that we received with Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, Lou Elizondo, Michael Schellenberger, and ex-NASA employee Michael Gold, he couldn't stop talking about how great NASA is. He couldn't stop talking about like, hey, you don't need AARO, you need NASA. We will do the research for you on UFOs. He was there to be nothing more than a cheerleader for NASA. But based off of that media briefing alone, that was in September of 2023, it was horrible. I would never want NASA to investigate UFOs and give that information to the public just based off alone of that media briefing. And so when Michael Gold was there during that panel, he was there were no good questions asked to him. He was literally there to say NASA's the best. NASA is number one. Give us that UFO news and data. Now, he worked for Bigelow Aerospace. None of the congressmen asked him about it. Now, there are some ideas as to why. At the very beginning of that congressional hearing, while it wasn't as bombshell as the one that we received with David Grush, Ryan Graves, and David Fravor about non-human biologics, are there alien bodies, right? That definitely grabs the media's attention. This one was really important, and I'm sad that it wasn't covered at the same magnitude, because at the very beginning of that congressional hearing, Jared Moskowitz said, I believe it was Jared. He said, right before this hearing, all of our questions had to be revised. We weren't allowed to ask certain questions, and we weren't allowed to ask certain panelists certain questions. That was public. No, he said that.
Wow.
You can find it at the very beginning of that hearing. I'm not making this up. And so then, as I was fuming over this hearing, I'm like, Michael Gould, why did nobody ask him about this? It hit me. And I'm like, the congressmen were probably told not to ask about the Bigelow Aerospace and what he did. Because that's such a red flag. Someone should have asked him about it. Now, in the last congressional hearing with David Grush, a lot was covered, but consistently NASA was brought up. What about NASA? What does NASA think? Is NASA doing investigations? Well, then right after, they made the independent study group that was made public, right? And then they had their media briefing soon after that congressional hearing. I think that was a big reason as to why Michael Gould was there, was because a lot of the congressmen were saying, what about NASA? And so he was there as a NASA representative just saying, yeah, NASA, let's go.
Explain why it's important about his connection with Bigelow Aerospace.
So from what we know, and funny enough, the information is limited, but Robert Bigelow is a billionaire. He does investigations and creates equipment for not only studying space, but getting ourselves into space. He was also the owner of Skinwalker Ranch before he sold it in 2016 to Brandon Fugel. He also has a consciousness institute, where he funds the biggest and brightest minds to get answers about life after death. Does our soul really die when the body dies, right? Does our consciousness continue going? So Robert Bigelow has shown a public interest in the UFO phenomenon, in the paranormal, and in consciousness. And you can also see it from the paper trail that he has given in the past and his conversations that he had with journalist George Knapp, where they have covered these kinds of things. He gave an interview, a few years ago, where George Knapp was talking to him about the UFO phenomenon because it's, again, public knowledge that Robert Bigelow has an interest in this. That's why he bought Skinwalker Ranch and why he created OSAP and why he worked with the government to get funding to understand Skinwalker Ranch better and other locations.
We're going to go down the Skinwalker Ranch rabbit hole later. So just
okay. Then I'll pause it right there. But when we're dealing with Bigelow, and in that interview that he gave with George Knapp, he said, they're walking among us, but everyone's so fixated on their cell phones, they could walk right past you and no one even notice. Now, coming from him, from Robert Bigelow, who has billions of dollars, can do so much research on the topic, it definitely takes people aback, more so than your neighbor saying it to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's ideas that he has warehouses that have crash retrieval technologies, that have alien tech. Now, is that part true? I can't tell you. You cannot file FOIA against a private company, a private organization, which is disappointing. But that's why the government hires contractors to make it as spread out as possible so that you can't get the information that you want.
Fascinating on that. And when you sit back and I have to ask you, because you know when my ears perked up when you were going, why aren't you asking? And I'm like, what would Christina Gomez have asked if she were there? Because I would, if I had a TARDIS and could take you back in time, I'd put you on that panel and I'd go, okay, tell me what you would ask. And I have that right now. What are some of the things that you think should have been asked? And I know I'm asking this off the top of your head, but still, it seems like it would be the things that are really a burning question for you.
Based off of what the congressman said, they got a lot of heat. They're like, oh, you asked really terrible questions. Well, first of all, you only have a limited amount of time. Second of all their questions had to be revised beforehand. And then not all of them are familiar with the topic to the extent that those that have been researching it for years are. And I agree, there weren't a lot of great questions, but you really have to dance around these kinds of topics from a political standpoint for these congressmen. Now, when we're dealing with Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, I wish they would have asked him more about AARO, because Gallaudet reported his encounter to the AARO office. And based on what he said, Tim Gallaudet, he said they were trying to explain away what I saw, what I experienced, and that it was an extraterrestrial. I wish there were more questions on that, because even though we know a little bit about AARO, it's very, very, very vague. We don't really know what they're doing behind the scenes. They created their website a little over a year and a half after the creation of AARO. Then it took them several months after for them to create a forum for witnesses to share their experiences. Now, for AARO, if you work for the government or for the military, can you share your experiences. On top of that, congressmen were pointing witnesses over to AARO, and they didn't do anything about it. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and Dr. John Kozlowski, the new director of AARO, said, thank you for sending people our way, this, that, and the other. But they've never released any information. And based off of Tim Gallaudet alone, it doesn't seem like they actually care about it. So I wish they would have asked more in-depth questions about what's really happening behind the scenes with AARO. How was the experience? I would have liked to have known that. Of course, Michael Gold, what he did for the Bigelow Aerospace, what's going on there. And with Lou Elizondo, this is where it gets a little tough, because all the information that he has been allowed to make public was in his book Imminent. And Anna Paulina Luna was like, I don't want to read your book. I want you to give me this information. And Elizondo was like, I can only provide you so much without infringing on NDAs. And that's where it gets difficult to ask the proper questions to get the answers that can actually be answered. Because you can ask a brilliant question and they're like, I can't answer that. Then what's the point of asking that question, right? So you really have to, and I don't think people realize that. You have to dance around to get the answers that you want, while still being in that lawful box of not letting these people infringe on their NDAs. So
That's a tough
it's
interview
tough.
with Lou Elizondo, wasn't it?
What was that?
That was a tough interview with Lou Elizondo, huh?
Anything dealing with these people is always difficult, because they have to be very strategic on how they answer
I
questions.
thought you handled it brilliantly.
Thank you.
But I could tell it was just tough. And I was right there with you. It was like, well, here's what the food smells like. You know, let me have a bite. Let me have a bite. But it's just fascinating. And here's me talking again. Again, this is my only opinion. So, if our dark overlords, wherever you are, decide to take it on, it's me saying this. I think they've tried to do a backhanded smear campaign against David Faber. Right?
David Fravor, yeah.
And he was the guy. He was the pilot that originally talked about the Tic Tac, and the Tic Tac, about how it was hovering above the water and then it was taking off and doing things that it should not have done. And this is a pilot. He was a training pilot. I mean, this is the best. And then when they had him on, I've seen him, as I was doing my research, is like, well, he's kind of changing his things and he's making it, saying that it's doing stuff that he didn't say it did then. And I'm like, wow, that's backhanded, that this is a guy who told you what had happened then. I can only imagine how it felt to say it then. You would even say even less back then, because it carried with it so much baggage that you could not sit back and go, no, this is really what it did. I think at that point, he gave them the bare minimum of what he was willing to say, because it was such a fantastic story, especially if you're in the world of military pilots. I know an old Top Gun pilot, and he is as It's cut and dried. That's all he is, man. He's fun, but he's cut and dried. And they're not going to go. They're not going to go overboard with it. So I feel like there's been kind of a backhanded smear campaign on him. What's your thoughts?
Well, we've seen that with Bob Lazar. We've seen it with David Grush. We've seen it with Lou Elizondo. We've seen it with Michael Schellenberger as well. It's nothing new. People want to hold others accountable, but your words do change over time. And also, at least in the United States, it's not a cultural practice to be a storyteller and to keep that story straight from beginning to end. Now, when we're dealing with Native Americans, there are a few tribes in the United States that, especially when they're training shamans, they have to learn to tell the story the exact same way they say it every single time without changing a single detail or even the sentence structure. It's more difficult than it sounds. Now, on top of that, when we're dealing with when this Tic Tac incident took place with David Fravor, you're right. The way that the narrative was back then, you're going to keep it as limited as possible with your information. Let me provide you an example. You have kids. You know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
They do something terrible. Maybe they break the vase, right?
They did
something
break
silly.
the vase. You said that today? That's me cleaning up the vase. It's crazy that you brought that up. I literally have a cut on my thumb. He broke the vase last night.
Well, then let's stick on to this. So they're hanging out with their friends. They're having a good time. They break the vase and they're laughing. They're like, did you see that? I threw the ball and it was just like this and the velocity was perfect and I aimed right at it. Awesome. Then you come along. You're Mr. Military, all right? You're Mr. CEO military #1 man. And you ask him, son, what happened? I don't know, the wind and accidentally, and yeah. They're going to give you such limited information just for you to get off of their back. But to their friend, they're going to spill all the details of exactly what happened because they remember, right? And we can apply that same childlike mentality and practice to adults when they are sharing their UFO experiences with the government for paperwork and for the military.
Here's my take on a recent event. When I first saw the whole drones in New Jersey thing, my take was that's a military thing and they're just trying to create the confusion, right? That what drones are capable of. And again, and you and I talked last time. My brother-in-law worked in the defense industry, and he had told me anything you know about is 10 to 15 years old, easily 10 to 15 years old. Anything you know about, we're way past anything you've ever heard about. And I think the same thing with drone technology. It's way past what we went here. But it just seems to be a distraction. And it was just a fun little, cute little story. Again, to just take our mind off all the other stuff that couldn't be explained. What was your take? And again, that's me, and I don't study it nearly as much as you. You are my expert. Let's be clear. I'm claiming you personally. You are my expert. What was your take on that whole thing?
There's a lot to the drone incursions in New Jersey, and I'm going to try and break it down. Okay, so I completely get your mentality. It's military. Because in December of 2019 into January of 2020, Colorado had the exact same incident happen to them. There were strange things in the sky over several weeks. Local sheriffs got involved. The FBI and the FAA got involved, and they got no answers. Now, when we're looking at, for instance, Colorado, where that incident took place in the beginning of 2020, and then the New Jersey drone incursions that we got in Thanksgiving of last year, those two locations in particular, those two states in particular, have Lockheed Martin facilities where those buildings specify in creating drone technology to start off with. Okay, so there's that. That's very important information. Now, these things, because calling them drones, I don't know if they are all drones. They have been titled as mysterious drones, but without ever collecting any of it, without any getting good footage of like seeing the propellers and the little stems coming out of the drones. I don't think they all are. And these objects have also been seen in Pennsylvania, in New York, in the Hudson Valley. And the Hudson Valley is very important because they've had their own UFO flaps for decades. So a UFO flap is when a UFO sightings happen more than once. And the Hudson Valley, it's interesting because that location in particular, they get like a spike of UFO sightings and then it dies out for a few years. And then you get that spike again and it dies out. Over the last few months, the Hudson Valley is getting a significant amount of these sightings. Then you are seeing these exact same kind of objects in Germany, in England. They're being seen in Sudan as well. Just to name a few locations, happening all at around the same time frame, November, December, into January. The sightings are still taking place today. And for 3 weeks, the Pentagon spokesman, Sabrina Singh, and John Kirby were like, they're not a threat. They're not ours. They're not foreign adversary. I actually don't even know what it is, but nothing to freak out about. Then on December 17th, we finally got a written public statement from the FBI, FAA, and the Pentagon saying, guys, it's actually ours. It's US military. They're hobbyist balloons out of the several thousand investigations that we've done. But why didn't you give us that answer much sooner? Because the FBI was immediately on the case like a few days after Thanksgiving investigating this. And the sheriff's department in New Jersey, the mayors, the governors of that area were like, this is a national security issue. These are a threat. We have no idea what they are. And the worst part is we can't shoot them down and we don't have the proper technology to intercept these drones. Only the government, only the military can do that. And we don't have that kind of power. Now, we haven't come across an instance yet where the military has used drone interception technology that we know of publicly. And they are in possession of it. The Navy in 2026 is going to start their Project Meteor, which is exactly that. It is using a special piece of technology to intercept drones. Now, they're saying in 2026, but they're probably already testing that stuff now. Why not test it in New Jersey, right? Give it a little test run. We don't have that information. None of them have been shot down. None of these objects have been collected. And so as these months have progressed, it's a possibility that we're dealing with a lot of different things. I think some of them really could be drones. I think some of them really could be our military, and some of them are not. Congressmen have shown an interest in this, and his name escapes me, but he's like, it's the Iranian mothership. And I'm like, whoa, that's a statement. Like, can you back that information up? What's going on?
You're going to say that, you better have some facts.
Yeah. But he just says that people have told me. Now, the local sheriff in the area has said that his men have seen these objects come out of the water. Like, come out of the ocean.
What do they call that? Transmedium aircraft. So you could you could run on water and air.
And it was a few dozen of these craft that were coming out of the water, according to these policemen. Now, they're all just, verbal testimony. I'm not there, so I cannot give you an answer. But there's a lot going on in the area, and it's keeping a lot of people on their toes. They're still being seen today, even though they're not being reported at the same level as in November and December. And that New Jersey in particular does have some very strange bases. One of them being the Joint Base McGuire-Dix-Lakehurst which houses the largest and most advanced unit in the world for aircraft launching missions, and is the world's only base equipped to handle the entire spectrum of operations related to aircraft recovery and launch as well. So, out of all the places to have these weird incursions, New Jersey would be a great place for that to happen.
See, I knew, and that's why I'm such a fan, because I knew I could bring that up, and I could not wait to get your explanation. But I've been going all the way down all the other rabbit holes. But yeah, those drone things, it's crazy that you bring that up. I had no idea that there were so many different locations at around the same time frame. Now that's weird. That's crazy that you get that. You can follow and go check out Christina's YouTube videos and George Knapp and all those.
We all want a better life. And what's the most valuable thing we have? Our health, right? Are you ready to make that a priority? My friend Candy Woodring shared the Tronol product line with me. Tronol is French for change life, and that's their goal. They offer products you've been curious about, like Activate, the GLP-1 line that helps curb appetite, the Enrich supplement that helps your body be more efficient in the use of food. What sets their products apart is they're all certified, backed by research, all natural, gluten-free, with no oil or other chemicals. As Candy says, what do you have to lose? Try the product. Email her at the link below, and she will reimburse your shipping cost and will work to make sure you're 100% satisfied. Change your life by clicking the link below.
And I think we touched on this last time, but I do want to bring it up. It's just so weird how many UFO sightings we have around nuclear plants.
Right.
Isn't it?
It is. It is. There's the most famous ones here in the US are the Maelstrom Air Force Base incident with Robert Salas, who is still with us today, who still talks about these things. You have the Vandenberg incident, which took place just a few decades ago in the 70s, I believe. And that's in California, where that was also seen. But if we want to bring this to more recent times, which I can assume that's what you're interested in, Gary, not
Yes.
the old stuff, but the new
The
stuff.
real stuff, it's interesting that it's been around ever since we've developed the technology. It's almost like being observed.
Well, India had a recent sighting in the last few months. And these craft were seen over a nuclear facility, obviously, right? But here's where it gets interesting, because people involved in this topic in India, UFO researchers, enthusiasts, and those that just worry about being in national security, they went to the Indian parliament and they're like, you need to check this stuff out. You need to give us an answer. And the Indian government was like, yeah, we know that they're there, but we're not going to do anything about it. We've heard that exact same narrative here in the US. And a lot of the times people getting into this topic, they say, UFO sightings are only in the US. How boring. They're happening all over the world. And when we're dealing with UFOs over nuclear facilities, one of the more recent ones took place in India over the last, if I had to do a guess, the last 12 to 16 months, which is recent, right? When we're looking at UFO history. Now, the Department of Energy had a congressional hearing last year, I believe it was in March of last year. And they're talking about, well, that just energy and things that wouldn't really catch all of our interests. But on that panel for congressmen asking questions was Anna Paulina Luna. Now, she has been a congresswoman that has been involved in this topic since 2023. She's part of the UAP caucus, and she's just shown a genuine interest, asking really great questions, doing investigations, getting on Air Force bases, and speaking to witnesses. She was a part of that congressional hearing with the DOE. And out of nowhere, she asks, what are your protocols on UFOs over these nuclear facilities, over these energy facilities? And the secretary of the DOE, Jennifer Jennifer something, she says, I can't answer that for you in a public setting. And now originally she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You mean drones? Yeah, we have protocols for that. And Anna said, I don't mean drones. What about the sightings before drones were even a thing? And the secretary said, I can answer that for you in a closed setting, which displays to us that the DOE does have protocols. They know hopefully how to manage this, but from the cases that we've had in the past, looking at Maelstrom, looking at Vandenberg, they just allow these craft to fly over these facilities and they can't do anything about it.
Wow. Well, you remember it's, and I probably will get this name wrong because I always do it. It was at the Fujiyama, the nuclear reactor in Japan that had been damaged by the tsunami,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Fukushima.
Fukushima. See, I knew you'd know. That's why I just threw it out
Because
there.
I recently watched a documentary on it. That's why.
You are my real live Google. Because I can just throw it out there and you go, oh yeah. Tell me about the documentary. Did you, I mean, because that's some crazy stuff. If let's explain that to people a little bit too, in case you're new. I know a lot of you know these things, but if you're like me, I'm still finding out new things because that's what I have. I have this font of knowledge and I'm able to like say, wow, this is cool. That was a crazy time. And there's video.
Right. So this was one of the biggest instances, one of the biggest instances where you had a nuclear reactor go haywire and it ruined the land in the area, it ruined the water in the area. They're still cleaning it up today in 2025. It's meant to be a 50-year plan, and they might even have to push it another few decades because they're way behind schedule because they didn't realize not only how detrimental the earthquake was in the area in Fukushima, but that they're not really even able to properly enter the nuclear reactors to remove the waste. And when it was built, they created walls high enough to prevent any tsunamis and things like this. But the one that took place that ruined that those nuclear reactors, because it was several of them, they weren't prepared for it. Obviously, that's why it ruined everything. And it created such a fear internationally of like, if you have a nuclear reactor, you need to add in all these extra protocols. If anything, it just ruins the entire world. Because in that entire area, people were affected, land was affected, water was affected. And right now, I think it's like in 2023, all of their canisters that was collecting all of this wastewater with this like nuclear waste, they all got full. And there were thousands of them that they now currently have to dilute that waste and put it back into the ocean. That infuriated people. And I think it still is today. Because even though it's diluted, it's still nuclear waste that can affect entire ecosystem. So while it's not really UFO related per se, it is something that we need to be familiar with and aware of.
But the thing is we have video of UAPs, you know, in the area, and again, when you go back on the history of taking a look at the nuclear thing, and even, you know, we have video, but we have. To go off on tangents, I love the thing you were talking about, the Italian soccer stadium, right? Where you had all these people at a soccer stadium, everybody have a certain thing. And yet we've seen all of these things and we still find a way to just go, no, it's not. It's not. And I think that's where all of us have that little tingling thing of, I don't feel like you're telling me the truth. And the Air Force, you know, they came out later on Roswell and said, okay, it wasn't a weather balloon. It was a high class, you know, it was a spy satellite. We didn't want to say it. So you lied. So you lied to us that time. Why are we believing that you're telling me the truth this time, 30, 40, 50 years later? It's again, it's these things that just make me go, I don't feel, and that's what I really enjoy about your work. I don't feel like you guys are telling me the truth. I'm just so thankful for truth seekers. And I feel like that's what you are, and that you're going through that. And it's just I think that's why your channel grows so much, because you do present it in a, hey, there's some things going out there that you don't have to believe, but you should know about.
That's in my opinion one of the best ways to approach it. It's just to provide the information, and you can either listen to it for entertainment or you can listen to it with while taking notes. I'm just here to give you the information. And when we're looking at Roswell, for instance, I'll make this very quick. They said, oh my gosh, it was a saucer. No, it was a weather balloon. Decades later, they said it's actually Project Mogul. We're seeing that exact same blueprint with the New Jersey drone incident, where they said, we don't know what they are, but they're not a threat. Actually, it's us, it's military, it's hobbyist. And then we can imagine in a few decades them saying, you know what? It was actually a secret project, when in reality, it might have really been UFOs, right? Extraterrestrials.
Well, it's like the gimbal, right? The gimbal is the very famous thing where the pilot's tracking it, and then all of a sudden it turns on its side while it continues to move, right? And now they're trying to do this whole thing of, oh, that's because the camera on the jet did it. The camera on the jet turned it. And they've I know you've seen Mick West, and he's this guy who goes out and tries to show, well, you could have done it. And my thing is, okay, you could have done it because you just did in control settings, but you weren't doing it while going 400 miles an hour in the sky following this thing. But they're trying to say, oh, see. And even then I was watching that and I'm like, you're still not explaining the whole process of them following this thing that they cannot. And by the way, on the radar, on that gimbal thing, there were tons. They just were showing you one, but there were a lot, right?
There were, and it's always about providing limited information in order to control the narrative. We've seen debunkers and skeptics since the beginning, since Project Blue Book was made, and even a little bit before that. And it's always these people that have a government background, most of the time, where they're trying to debunk anything and everything possible without providing all of the information. And we're seeing that today with Dr. John Kozlowski, the new director of AARO, when he gave his briefing to Kirsten Gillibrand's last year. I think it was in December. Dates are not my thing, but it was definitely last year. It was right after the congressional hearing.
It doesn't matter. It's the gist of the information.
No, dates matter. But anyways, so he's giving his presentation to Kirsten Gillibrand and other panelists a day or two after releasing the latest UFO report, which we're supposed to get every single year from AARO. And this was the first time that Dr. John Kozlowski gave us his report since he assumed office in August of last year. And he said, the Aguadilla UFO incident, the one in Puerto Rico, it was parallax. Yeah, that's what it was. But in his paperwork and in his 7-minute presentation, by the way, he provided no information as to how he received that knowledge. And when we're dealing with people that want to debunk, they're going to say something and sound super smart about it, but they're not going to back it up with the data or with a replica of how they received that information. Just, hey guys, just trust me. Okay. I have the background. I have the knowledge. I'm super smart. Okay. Just believe me. And that really upset me when I was reading the paperwork, when I was watching his presentation, Dr. John Kozlowski, of okay, but how did you receive that answer that it was parallax? Because we're dealing with the Aguadilla incident specifically. It's a fascinating video of how this craft, believed to be about the size of a truck, goes into the water without a splash, comes back up, and it splits into two objects. Now, there have been ideas that it was Chinese lanterns, but the speed doesn't really meet up with it, or how it came from 1 to 2. That's kind of been one of the biggest explanations. But as of recently, just a few months ago, they're saying, nah, it's parallax. Get it together. You should know this stuff. And but there was no reason as to why.
Yeah, they said it was birds. Even though it's the size of a truck, as you said, and it was going at amazing speeds and going up and down, y'all, it was birds.
Maybe a pterodactyl if we're lucky, because something that big.
Okay, that would be awesome. All right, Koja, I want to make sure I go down because I know you have limited time, and I'm so thankful for it. But we have to touch on the Skinwalker Ranch. I have not I've not went down that rabbit hole yet. I've had friends who are like, "Oh, Gary, you've got to," and I'm like, "I will as soon as I find a little extra time." But yeah, I usually spend a lot of my extra time doing stuff I need to do. But I had put it on my list when you brought it up. I'm like, okay, if she gets a chance to talk about Skinwalker Ranch, I want to have a few minutes. Explain to me this whole phenomenon. And I know I left the last 10 minutes of the interview, but still, I just want to get a little taste of it from you, and I wanted to save it for you.
Skinwalker Ranch gained popularity from the TV show Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, run by the new owner, Brandon Fugel. But it was books written about it in the past, very limited information about it, that it gained publicity through George Knapp, when and he still is, friends with Robert Bigelow, who was the then owner of Skinwalker Ranch for a few decades, actually. And Robert Bigelow, he worked alongside the United States government to get information about this strange location in the middle of nowhere in Utah. Now, when we're looking at Skinwalker Ranch, you're dealing with a bunch of different phenomena. People have seen UFOs, people have seen shadow people, they have seen portals, Bigfoot, dire wolves. Dire wolves are extinct now. They're just like a wolf on steroids. They are ginormous. Now, originally, this ranch was owned by just some humble farmers, just people that are ranchers. They were just raising their cattle, minding their own business. It got so out of hand that the military, the government, ended up buying it from them. They're like, "We'll take this off your hands. You don't really need this stuff." Skinwalker Ranch is it's not an isolated incident. There are other locations around the world that have very similar things happen. Bradshaw Ranch is one of them, and I know that their new TV show that's run by Skinwalker Ranch and Beyond Skinwalker Ranch talks about these things. About there's other locations in the U.S. and around the world that are encountering UFOs, paranormal, cryptids, portals, things like this. One of them's also in Romania, just to kind of throw out there to make it international, right? But Skinwalker Ranch, it was documented originally by George Knapp. He's the one that really got it famous. And I know a lot of people are familiar with this, so I won't go into like crazy detail. But one thing that always caught me off guard is if there was so much going on, so much recorded information, why did Bigelow sell it? That's my question. Why? Especially if it's meant to be maybe confidential. Why would he sell it? And then right after Prometheus comes up and they're like, "Hey, let's make it into a TV show. What do you think?" Now, it's going to be one of two ways. And I want to be optimistic, so I'm only going to say one of them. It's part of the disclosure movement. In a roundabout way, they're like, we're gonna try and get people just interested and knowledgeable in this topic. That there are places around the world where the veil is so thin, where it's not just paying your bills, working your 9 to 5, but that there's so much more out there that should capture our interest and our curiosity. And if we're able to understand this paranormal, maybe it will benefit our science, but maybe even also our consciousness. And while that might sound like a little woo, a little out there, if we don't understand these kinds of things the way that our ancestors did, we might not be able to traverse our universe the way, the speed, and the control that we want to. We have to be open-minded. We have to be skeptical, and we have to do the research. We can't just say, "There's nothing to see here. Go along with your boring, mundane lives." People always want that little bit of curiosity. And that's the only way we're able to explore our universe to the ways that we want to, like in the way it's portrayed in Star Trek. It's starting off with these little things here that are terrestrial on planet Earth before we can go out there into space.
Well, and that's what I told you that I love about astrophysics. If we go back to it, is that we're finding more and more impossible. right? We come up with things that are just impossible. And you can, over the last 10 years, and especially with the addition of the James Webb, we're just like, these things shouldn't exist. Our math says it literally shouldn't exist. And even now, we can't figure out the age of the universe. It's supposed to be 14 billion years old, but we found galaxies that are 23 billion years old. Anybody? Can we do that math? Did somebody forget to carry a one? I don't know. And so taking that same completely scientific background, because when you're dealing with astrophysics, completely scientific, and go, wow, there's some weird stuff out there. There's some stuff that we cannot explain. And bringing it back on got the macro level, bringing it back to the micro level here on this side of the plane, and go, y'all, can we be open to it? Can we just be open to it? I do want to ask you, what are some of the big, what are the big responses you get? Or is it UFOs? Is it paranormal? Is it Bigfoot? Is it, because you cover so many things? And again, I'm asking the questions that everybody else doesn't get to ask you, because not everybody else gets to interview Christina Gomez, but I do. So what is it? What are the ones that you go, wow, that was a crazy reaction?
My focus is on UFOs. That's what I specialize in. But at the same time, I really enjoy seeing the convergence between cryptids and UFOs, the paranormal and UFOs. J. Allen Hynek and Steve Mera have done significant research onto how people have experienced something paranormal in their home or around them, and then immediately have a UFO sighting, or vice versa. Exactly. So it might be, yes. So it might be that maybe it's the labels that are confusing us, but that we could be dealing with the exact same phenomenon, right? As an example. So I really like looking at that, and then just taking a step back and saying, and thinking to myself, okay, what's really going on here? Also looking at folklore and how they try to explain the UFO sightings and the paranormal as well. I really enjoy doing that. That one's I like to do more on my free time, which is so limited. I don't research that for like, I don't research it, but I do it when I have a little time. Be like, oh, I like doing this. There's a difference, right? A little bit.
Well, everybody has that. Everybody has that, where it's like, I've got my work, but you're my connecting tissue. That it's my work when you're coming on, but it's what I do in my free time when I get a chance to also.
The best kind of job, right? Get to have fun.
Absolutely. Listen, again, I promised you I wouldn't take up more than an hour of your time because you're so doggone busy. 3 jobs, y'all. 3 jobs. And then editing and doing all of this stuff too. But if you're not checking out Strange Paradigms, and we've got all the links, we've got all of her stuff, check it out. And she's brilliant. And what I'm trying to do is get her to come on once a year, because there's so much that we discover every year. And, the whole India thing and all of this stuff, and the AARO, and because I didn't get a chance to talk to you about that last time, and so I'm like, I made sure I wanted to hit that. And I'm so glad you brought up Sean Kirkpatrick. And I'm just like, this is fascinating stuff. And, the truth is out there, Scully. So keep after it. Christina, you're the best.
Thank you so much for having me on yet again. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. You ask the most fun questions.
Well, next year, right? Same time, same channel.
I got you.